Welcome to Nightmare Narratives, where every story is a journey into darkness. Prepare to be haunted by tales that will linger long after the lights go out. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway. My wife Sarah and I had booked a 7-day cruise in the Caribbean. The ship was massive, luxurious, and filled with every amenity you could think of. We were both excited, especially Sarah, who had never been on a cruise before. On the second day, we docked at a small island for a day of exploration. We spent the morning snorkeling and lounging on the beach. Sarah seemed a little off, but I chalked it up to the motion of the ship. She assured me she was fine, just a bit tired. That evening, back on the ship, we had dinner at one of the fancy restaurants. Sarah excused herself to go to the restroom and never came back. I waited for what felt like an eternity before getting up to look for her. I checked the restroom, the bar, and even our cabin, but she was nowhere to be found. I reported her missing to the ship's security. They assured me they would conduct a thorough search. Hours turned into a nightmare as the crew searched every inch of the ship, but there was no sign of Sarah. The next morning, the captain announced that they had to continue to the next port, but would keep looking. I felt helpless, watching the coastline disappear as we sailed away. It was as if Sarah had vanished into thin air. The authorities were notified, and an investigation began, but no trace of her was ever found. Years later, I still replay that night over and over in my mind, wondering what happened. Did she fall overboard? Was she taken? The unanswered questions haunt me to this day. A few months after the cruise, I received a package in the mail. There was no return address, just my name, written in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a small box containing Sarah's favorite necklace, the one she had been wearing the night she disappeared. There was also a note that simply read, "She's with us now." I turned the note over to the police, but they couldn't find any leads. The package's origins were a mystery. I started receiving anonymous phone calls late at night. A voice would whisper Sarah's name and then hang up. It was driving me mad. One night, I decided to confront the source of these calls. I traced the number to a small town near the coast. When I arrived, I found an abandoned house with a view of the sea. Inside, I discovered a room filled with photographs of Sarah, from our wedding day to that last dinner on the ship. There was also a diary detailing her every move on the cruise. The final entry read, "I have to go. They're calling me." It was dated the night she disappeared. I felt a chill down my spine. As I left the house, I noticed someone watching me from a distance. When I turned to confront them, they vanished into the fog. I've never been able to find out who took Sarah or why. The calls stopped, but the nightmares haven't. I see her in my dreams, standing on the deck of that ship, looking out to sea, whispering, "I'm with them now." I traveled across the country, interviewing these families and piecing together a pattern. The disappearances all happened in a specific region of the Caribbean, known for its treacherous waters and countless shipwrecks. Some locals believed it was cursed, a place where the spirits of those lost at sea would lure the living to join them. Desperate for closure, I returned to the Caribbean and hired a boat to take me to the coordinates where the most disappearances had occurred. As we approached the area, a dense fog enveloped us, and the air grew cold. The boat's instruments went haywire, and we were forced to navigate blindly. Through the mist, I saw the outline of an old, decaying ship, eerily similar to the one Sarah and I had sailed on. It was as if it had materialized out of nowhere. We boarded the ghost ship, and as we explored its haunted corridors, I felt an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. In the ship's ballroom, I found Sarah, dressed in the same gown she had worn the night she disappeared. She was surrounded by other lost souls, all with vacant eyes and ethereal forms. They were dancing to a haunting melody that seemed to echo from another time. I called out to her, and for a moment she seemed to recognize me. Tears streamed down her face as she reached out, but an unseen force pulled her back. The other spirits closed in, their cold hands pushing me away. Before I was forced to leave, Sarah whispered one last message. "You have to let go. It's the only way." I realized then that she had accepted her fate, but I was still holding on, trapped in my obsession. Back on our boat, I watched as the ghost ship disappeared into the fog, taking Sarah and the other lost souls with it. I returned home, finally understanding that I needed to let go of my search and allow Sarah to rest in peace. I had been working as a cruise ship photographer for a few years when I first encountered something truly chilling. It was a typical assignment on a ship bound for the Mediterranean. My job was to capture the happy moments of the passengers, from candid shots by the pool to formal portraits in the dining rooms. One evening I was taking pictures at a formal event. Among the guests, a woman caught my eye. She was dressed in an old-fashioned gown, which I thought was part of a costume. She looked elegant, but out of place. I snapped a few photos of her as she mingled with the other passengers. Later, when I was reviewing the photos, I noticed something odd. In every picture, the woman seemed to be fading, as if she were a ghost. I checked the guest list but found no record of anyone matching her description. I even asked some of the staff and passengers if they had seen her, but no one remembered her. Curiosity got the better of me, and I did some digging. I learned that decades ago, a woman fitting her description had been a passenger on a cruise ship that had mysteriously disappeared in the same waters we were sailing. The legend was that her spirit still roamed the seas, searching for her lost vessel. As the days went on, I started seeing her more frequently, always in the periphery, always fading. I tried to capture her on film again, but every picture came out blank. The more I saw her, the more I felt a cold presence around me. I confided in a fellow crew member who told me that the ship had a history of strange occurrences. He said that some crew members believed the ship was haunted by the spirits of those lost at sea. I didn't believe in ghosts, but the experiences I had made me question everything. One night I woke up to the sound of soft sobbing. It was coming from the hallway outside my cabin. I grabbed my camera and cautiously opened the door. There she was, standing at the end of the corridor, looking out of a porthole. I approached her slowly, and as I got closer, she turned to me. Her eyes were filled with sadness and longing. I asked her who she was and what she wanted. She simply whispered, "Find him." Before I could ask anything else, she vanished. I spent the next few days researching the ship's history and discovered that her fiancé had been a crew member who perished in a fire on the ship many years ago. His body was never found. Determined to help her, I searched the ship for any clues about his fate. In an old storage room, I found a charred diary belonging to a crew member. The last entry described his love for a passenger and his plan to propose to her the night of the fire. The pages were filled with love letters and sketches of the woman in the gown. I brought the diary to the spot where I had last seen her. As I read the final entry aloud, I felt a chill in the air. Suddenly she appeared before me, smiling through her tears. She reached out to touch the diary, and as she did, she slowly faded away, leaving behind a sense of peace. After that night, I never saw her again. The haunting presence was gone, and the ship felt lighter. I kept the diary as a reminder of the experience and the love story that had transcended time and tragedy. However, my curiosity didn't end there. I wanted to know more about the fire that had claimed so many lives and left behind these restless spirits. I delved into old newspapers and maritime records, uncovering a tragedy that had been largely forgotten. The fire had started in the ship's engine room, quickly spreading through the lower decks. Despite the crew's best efforts, many passengers and crew members were trapped and perished in the blaze. Among the victims was a young crew member who had been planning to propose to his beloved that very night. His love letters, found in the diary, painted a picture of a deep and unbreakable bond. I reached out to historians and maritime experts, piecing together the story of the doomed voyage. The more I learned, the more I felt a connection to the lost souls. I organized a small memorial service on the ship, inviting crew members and passengers to honor those who had perished. During the service, I shared the story of the young lovers and read passages from the diary. As I spoke, I felt a presence around us, as if the spirits were finally at peace. The air grew warm and a soft glow seemed to envelop the room. After the service, several passengers came forward with their own experiences of ghostly encounters on the ship. They spoke of mysterious figures, cold drafts, and eerie whispers. It was clear that the spirits of the past still lingered, but they were no longer trapped in sorrow. They had found a way to communicate their stories and connect with the living. In the years that followed, I continued to work on the ship, but my role changed. I became a sort of unofficial historian and storyteller, sharing the tales of the ship's haunted past with new passengers. Each voyage brought new encounters and new stories, but the memory of that ghostly woman and her lost love remained at the heart of my work. To this day, I still feel their presence guiding me and reminding me of the enduring power of love and the importance of remembering those who came before us. Their story is a testament to the connections that transcend time and space, and the hope that even in death, we can find peace and understanding. My family and I decided to take a cruise to celebrate my parents' anniversary. It was a beautiful ship, and we were all looking forward to spending quality time together. The first few days were perfect, filled with laughter, food, and fun activities. On the fourth day, we returned to our cabin after a day of excursions to find our cabin door ajar. Nothing seemed to be missing, but there was an eerie feeling in the room. We reported it to the ship's security, but they found no evidence of forced entry and assured us it was likely an oversight by the housekeeping staff. That night, as we settled into bed, we heard strange noises coming from the cabin next door. It sounded like whispers and the rustling of paper. My father knocked on the door, but there was no response. We decided to call it a night, but the noises persisted, keeping us on edge. The next morning, we asked the steward about the cabin next door. He looked puzzled and told us that the cabin was unoccupied. My father insisted that someone was in there, so the steward reluctantly opened the door. The cabin was empty, but what we found inside sent shivers down our spines. The cabin was filled with the old, tattered books and photographs of people from decades ago. The bed was unmade, and the air felt heavy with a musty odor. There was a notebook on the table with pages filled with frantic handwriting, detailing the experiences of someone who claimed to be trapped on the ship, unable to escape. We couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, so we requested a cabin change. The rest of the trip was uneventful, but the memory of that eerie cabin lingered. After the cruise, I did some research and found out that years ago, a passenger had gone missing from that very cabin. They were never found, and some say their spirit still haunts the ship, desperately trying to communicate their fate. Whether it's true or not, that experience left a mark on all of us. To this day, I can't forget the feeling of stepping into that cabin and the sense of an unseen presence watching our every move. A few months later, I received an email from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "The Cabin's Secret." Inside was a scanned letter, dated over 50 years ago from the missing passenger. It described a hidden compartment in the cabin where they had kept their most valuable possessions, hoping to retrieve them before they disappeared. Curious, I booked another cruise on the same ship, determined to find the compartment. With the help of a sympathetic crew member, I gained access to the old cabin. We searched every nook and cranny until we found a loose panel in the wall. Inside, we discovered a small box containing a locket, a diary, and several old photographs. The diary revealed the passengers' fears and suspicions that someone on board was watching them. They wrote about strange encounters and their growing paranoia. The final entry read, "I fear this will be my last entry. If anyone finds this, please tell my family what happened to me." We turned the items over to the authorities, hoping to finally bring some closure to the case. The ship's history was updated to include the story of the missing passenger, and a small memorial was placed in the cabin. The experience left me with more questions than answers. Who was watching the passenger? Why did they disappear? While I never found all the answers, I felt a sense of peace, knowing that their story was finally being told. The cabin, once a source of fear, became a place of remembrance and reflection. Months later, I received another mysterious message, this time through a handwritten letter slipped under my door. The letter was from a former crew member who claimed to have known the missing passenger. He wrote that the passenger had confided in him about seeing shadowy figures and hearing voices that no one else could perceive. The crew member described how the passenger had become increasingly agitated and fearful, convinced that something malevolent was on board. He had tried to help, but the passenger's paranoia grew, and one night they vanished without a trace. The letter ended with a warning. Beware the shadows. They still linger. I returned to the ship once more, this time with a sense of urgency and a determination to uncover the truth. I spoke with current and former crew members, collecting their stories and piecing together the ship's dark history. Many recounted similar experiences of seeing shadowy figures, hearing disembodied voices, and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. I began to believe that the ship itself was haunted, not just by the spirits of the lost, but by something more sinister. I explored every inch of the ship, seeking out the places where these encounters were most frequent. In the lower decks, where the missing passenger had last been seen, I found an old storage room that had been sealed off. With the help of a crew member, I managed to open the door. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. We found remnants of old uniforms, tools, and personal belongings left behind by former crew members. Among the debris was a journal, its pages brittle and yellowed with age. The journal belonged to the ship's first officer from decades ago. His entries detailed a series of mysterious events and disappearances that had plagued the ship since its maiden voyage. He wrote about shadowy figures that seemed to move with a life of their own, whispers that filled the corridors at night, and a growing sense of unease among the crew. The final entry was particularly chilling. I fear that the ship is cursed. There is something here, something that feeds on fear and despair. It is relentless, and I am powerless to stop it. If you are reading this, know that you are not alone. The shadows are watching. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to confront the malevolent presence. I gathered a group of passengers and crew members who had experienced the hauntings, and together, we performed a cleansing ritual. We lit candles, burned sage, and recited prayers, hoping to banish the darkness that had taken hold of the ship. As we completed the ritual, the temperature dropped, and the air grew still. For a moment, it felt as though the ship itself was holding its breath. Then, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and filling the space with an eerie silence. We stood in the darkness, waiting, and finally, we heard it, a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "Thank you." In the days that followed, the atmosphere on the ship changed. The sense of dread lifted, and the ghostly encounters ceased. The ship, once a vessel of fear, became a place of healing and hope. I continued to share the stories of the lost and the haunted, but now there was a sense of closure and peace. The experience taught me that the past is never truly gone, and that the spirits of those who came before us still linger, seeking resolution and understanding. By acknowledging their presence and telling their stories, we can help them find the peace they deserve, and in doing so, find peace ourselves. Thank you for joining me on this chilling journey through the haunted halls of cruise ships. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more spine-tingling tales.